Good afternoon, everyone. Those of you who are in the webinar and those who are seeing it streaming on Facebook, we welcome all of you. I am Carl Rosen, General President of UE, and we're very glad to have you here this afternoon. There's going to be about 5 of us giving some remarks of a few minutes each. That'll take probably about the first 30 minutes, and then we'll have 30 minutes for questions and answers using the Q&A function. So keep track of any questions you have for any of the speakers, and we will try and get back to them best we can. I'll just give a little background here. We have a situation where UE Local 506 in Erie, Pennsylvania represents about 1,400 workers who make locomotives for the Wabtec Corporation. And they are embarking now on a historic struggle to bring accountability to a corporation that has willfully and repeatedly violated the terms of the collective bargaining agreement that it signed with its own workers in 2019. That collective bargaining agreement does not contain the right to strike over grievances. That right had been in the long time, 80-year sum contract with GE, which used to own the facility. But when the ownership changed, some items were changed in the contract, and that was one, and it went to a kind of standard grievance and arbitration procedure, which has not worked and has left Wabtec in a situation where it's felt free to violate the terms of that agreement again and again. And it's not just the union saying this. There was a recent academic study by the Project for Middle Class Renewal at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, which has confirmed what the experience of the members have been over the last few years. This report found that since Local 506 lost the right to strike over grievances, the number of grievances per capita actually doubled, and those that were filed, rather than the issues getting resolved, in fact, the grievance process resulted in ongoing friction. After the speakers, we will distribute a link to that report so you can see the details for yourself. For us in UE, the conclusions of this report and the experiences of our members, it really comes as no surprise. Local 506 is continuing on the tradition of the workers who built our union and the workers who built the other great industrial unions in the 1930s and 1940s, which transformed the way of life for the working class of this country. Those workers understood that that workers' fundamental power is in the right to withhold our labor, and that giving up that power means conceding complete control of the workplace to the employer. Beginning in the 1940s, too much of the labor movement gave up that right. And that retreat from aggressive struggle is one of the key reasons why union power, and with it, our living standards and working conditions, have declined since the 1940s. So we hope that this fight that Local 506 is waging not only improves conditions for the workers they represent in Erie, but can be an inspiration to the rest of the US labor movement to return to that spirit of aggressive struggle, of fighting against employers' complete control over the workplace. You're going to hear this afternoon from leaders of Local 506, also from Reverend Richard Freeman of the Pennsylvania Interfaith Impact Network, and from Sara Nelson, President of the Association of Flight Attendants, and one of the foremost proponents of the importance of workers' right to strike in the US. So we'll jump right into that, and then following it, open it up for questions and discussion. I'll call first on UE Local 506 President, Scott Slawson. Scott, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Carl. Thank you for everybody participating today. So for us, this is fundamentally about accountability. 4 years ago, Wabtec asked us to put a little trust in them, claiming they were a different company that wanted to resolve issues quickly and fairly with their employees. Given the tumultuous start of the relationship we had with them as former GE Transportation employees making the transition to Wabtec, We did put a little faith in them and agreed to limit our ability to strike over grievances. And over the last 4 years, the company has repeatedly abused that trust and have proven they don't want to be held accountable for anything regarding their employees. The company has shown no respect for its workforce. The CEO continually states that employees are our #1 assets, but they continue to largely ignore issues as well as continuously reinterpret the contract that we have in place. And as the report says, Wabtec is trying to turn the grievance process into a management tool rather than a method for settling disputes. We've repeatedly attempted to resolve issues through the grievance process, but have no way to hold the company accountable for the answers, and we're forced into arbitration after arbitration. Company claims the grievance process is working for them, but as the report indicates, and we've been stating, our members are becoming increasingly cynical about the company's commitment to resolving issues. And this has led to increased conflict between the union and the company, not less. And generally, the purpose of a collective bargaining agreement is to reduce friction, not increase it. It's a common misconception that unions want to be on strike, or employees on strike for that matter. Under GE, we used the right to strike extremely sparingly. Basically, from 2005 to 2019, we struck on a total of 4 grievances totaling 13 hours. And during that same time frame, we filed many additional notices of potential strike action. But what they did was they forced a conversation between the union and the company to try to resolve the issue. And this is why having the right to withhold your labor creates mutual respect and accountability. The plant that we work in can have a bright future. Our country needs to build green locomotives, and we're prepared to do it. The EPA is moving in that direction, and a recent report, which was released last month, details the thousands of jobs that could be created here in Erie building green locomotives for our country. There's no dispute that we are the most skilled locomotive building workforce in the country, if not the world, but in order to move forward to this bright future, Wabtec needs to respect the experience and expertise of our workforce, which today is largely ignored. Company needs to be accountable to the people who build its locomotives, not just the shareholders, which is why we've proposed to restore the right to strike over grievances so that disputes can be resolved swiftly and fairly rather than taking several years to resolve them. To this day, we are still waiting on answers to grievances that were filed almost 4 years ago. We've been sued by our employer in federal court for winning arbitration hearings, as well as a host of other abuses that have occurred over the last 4 years. With that, I'll turn it back to Carl and thank you everybody for participating.
Thank you, Scott. Next, we'll hear from UE Local 506 Chief Plant Steward, Leo Grzegorzewski.
Okay, hey, thanks everybody for joining the meeting. I'm going to go over the grievance process quickly this afternoon, and to hopefully show you what we've been up against between what we had with General Electric, which was the right to strike under grievances, and what we have with Wabtec, which we do not have the right to strike over grievances, and hopefully the proof is in the numbers. So a brief description of our grievance process. Step 1, we have step 1, step 2, and step 3. Step 1 is basically argued on the floor between employees and the shop floor foreman. If it's not settled there, it goes to step 2, where we argue those grievances once every month, and that's between a chief steward of the area, the chief plant steward, myself, and the company's junior UR staff. If nothing is settled there, then it goes to step 3. This is a final step in our grievance process, and it's a way to get things resolved. The attendees at that meeting is at a higher level. That is the lead UR manager. He is there. Myself, the chief plant steward, our president, Scott Slawson, our business agent, John Miles, and our international representative, John Thompson. The issue we have here with Wabtec at step 3, which varies differently when we had it with General Electric. General Electric brought in their corporate UR HR person. Wabtec uses their lead UR HR manager on site. He's the same guy that has rejected the grievances at step 1 and step 2. So you can understand what we're up against. He already knows the grievances and he's already rejected them twice. Again, the difference between GE and Wabtec in the grievance process was we had the right to hold the company accountable in the grievance process. So grievances filed under General Electric over a 4-year period, about 500 grievances, 1,400 people, 125 a year, plus or minus a few. Under Wabtec in the same period, 4-year period, over 1,200 grievances. 1,200 grievances, and many of those were for about 1,000 people because we had a layoff. Grievance resolves. Here's the difference there. GE, most if not all grievances were settled or resolved at step 1 or step 2 of the grievance process. With Wabtec, no grievances are settled at step 1, and maybe 3% are settled at step 2. So then we move on to step 3. Step 3, with General Electric, we would take 6 to 9 grievances every 3 months. Every 3 months, understand that. With Wabtec, we have a meeting every single month, step 3 every single month, and we're taking 30 to 40 grievances every month. Of those grievances that make it to step 3, 95% of them are rejected, and we have to vote on whether to take them to arbitration. Arbitration is a very expensive deal for UE 506. It cost our union about $9,000 for each arbitration case. We filed 68 arbitrations against this company. It's absolutely ridiculous because they know we can't do anything else but take it to arbitration. Stall, 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 delay, delay, delay. Our plant manager just recently cited an arbitration decision that we won for a member that was unjustly terminated. That was over a year ago, and they're proud of that. That person should have never been terminated in the first place, and she had to go through hell for a year, over a year, to be reinstated. Another grievance that the company backed out on 24 hours before the arbitration case. A steward was suspended for 1 week without pay because they accused him of a work stoppage. That union steward wasn't even there that day. But that company, instead of settling it with us, because if we had the right to strike, we would have probably pulled that trigger. They know, they just delay. Less than 24 hours before the arbitration hearing, they knew we weren't giving up. They knew they didn't have a good case, and they resolved it. This is just the stuff that you go through, that we've been going through without the right to strike. The company just announced recently they've been scheduling vacations for workers. They have never done that in 4 years that we've been here. They're actually telling people when they have to take their vacations. People have had birthdays taken away from them, their kids' birthdays, vacations that they're not able to go on because the company is scheduling their vacations. It's just missed family time. We have to gain this right to strike. And like I said, the proof is in the numbers that I've given you. I could bore you with a whole host of numbers, but this is what these companies do. If you don't have the right to strike, they're going to delay, and drain your bank account with arbitrations and have a third party decide. And that's not where you want to be. So that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Leo. Next, we're very pleased to have with us Reverend Richard Freeman. He's the president of the Pennsylvania Interfaith Impact Network, and here to express some thoughts about the religious community's viewpoint on this situation. Oh, you need to unmute. There you go.
Thank you so much, Carl. For those of you who don't know who we are, let me just give you a very, very brief synopsis. Penn is an amalgamation of faith communities from various faith traditions. And our motto is very basic: putting faith into action. People from various traditions, from Christians, Muslims, Jews, even atheists. We come together because we believe in a moral underpinnings for what we do. that also comes to bear on the issues of labor and how we believe that the human element is always lost in these discussions. More times than not, we talk about the reality of workers, and that's a very honorable term, but never forget that workers are human beings. They are people that are affected every day by what we do and how our families interact, and what their incomes do are not just producing product, but they sustain the lives of real people. I'm blessed to be a dad. I have 3 kids. I have 4 grandbabies now. I've been married for 40 years. And all of those things are sustained by the work that I do every day, a part of my human endeavor. What happens when an employer violates my humanity? That's what Wabtec has done. It has violated the humanity of 1,400 people in Erie County. And frankly, I'm mad about it. I don't get angry often, but when I do, I get very sincere and put my feet into the fire with you. That's why I'm with UE and Local 506 in this fight. There are lives that hang in the balance. Our faiths tell us we cannot sit idly by and allow the humanity of our brothers and sisters in Local 506 to be violated and let us sit on the sideline and be quiet about it. If it is not our fight, then what happens when it comes to our door? It will come to our door. And I don't want to be a naysayer, but let's be quite candid. If any of you are students of history, Nazi Germany was this: when the powers that be squashed people, the common people. And the church, let's be honest about it, didn't speak up in Nazi Germany. Well, I won't be on the side of that argument. I won't be on that side of history. I'm on the side of history that says, well, frankly, hell no, that won't go. And we're going to fight with you and partner with you so that at Wabtec we'll know that the moral arc of this fight is on our side. We also believe that the environment is critically important. It's sacred work. And your initiatives to bring green rail to Erie County, I think is sacred work. And we need to be in that fight with you. Because if we don't protect the environment, guess what? You can't live without clean air, y'all. And we're going to be in that fight to encourage it. And it's a huge juggernaut of an economic boom potential for Erie. I read in your report, they're talking about the potential of 4,600 direct jobs. Now, I don't know about you, but 4,600 good jobs, family sustaining jobs, everybody in Erie County should be shouting. Everybody in Erie County should be on your side. There should not be a pastor in Erie County that's not joining with you, because every member of your union is also a part of somebody's congregation. That helps them all. Let's get busy and rally around this fight on both fronts. We should fight for the right to strike. Why? If I am being violated, it's the only means I have to protect and protest the maltreatment. Secondly, we need to fight vigorously for the jobs of the future, the environmentally protecting jobs, but the jobs that will bring and keep families in the Erie County sustained very well. So not only do I bring my prayers, but I bring my hands and I bring my feet of our organization that we can win this fight against Wabtec. So Carl, we're rolling up our sleeves on our end to do all we can to be a support to you in this fight.
Thank you, Reverend Freeman, so much for those comments and for being there to support worker struggle. And then our last set of remarks will be from a great labor leader who is always standing up for the right of workers to stand up for themselves. That's our kind of labor leader, Sara Nelson, president of the of the Association of Flight Attendants. Sara, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks, Carl. I'm thrilled to be here. Always thrilled to be with UE. I gotta say, this is a righteous fight at Wabtec. I wanna say thank you to all of the workers at Wabtec who are getting ready to take this on. Clearly, the company has shown us that their word is no good. But we also know this for many reasons. We know that we do not just live in a democracy, we live in a system of capitalism. Capitalism is about maximizing profits. It is never about the people. It is never about making good on any promises. It's only about the profits. It's with the moniker that greed is good. Well, that kind of greed has to have a countervailing force that is stronger than that greed. And that is the value of workers standing together and withholding our labor to hold to account those in the capitalists who would otherwise take our labor for nothing at all, for free. They would want to give us nothing if they could. So we have to have that, we have to understand that. And I think that these last 4 years have borne that out so that everyone understands that collective bargaining only works when there is a credible strike threat. Everyone has something to lose in a strike. For workers, a strike only works if we are in agreement with each other that it is time to strike. So that is a high bar for us as workers, because we don't choose to come together. This is one of the last non-self-selecting places in America. We find our commonality in the fact that our labor is what is making this company run. And withholding that labor together is the power that we have to take on the capitalists who would only take the profits off of our backs. So the right to strike in these grievances, as you have seen, was necessary in order to push collective bargaining to the front line. Resolving these issues at step 1 or step 2, that keeps it closer to the shop floor. It denies the union busters the ability to use the 4 Ds of union busting: divide, delay, distract, and ultimately demoralize. It is demoralizing to fight for a contract, sign that contract with an employer, agree to a set of standards that we agree to come to work for, and then to have that company think that that signed piece of paper means nothing at all. It is demoralizing to go through step 1, step 2, step 3, and then have them go to court and try to vacate the award after all of that, to delay even further and try to have people be demoralized. We push the solutions, we push the collective bargaining much closer to the issues, to results, to good morale on the job, to the ability to focus on making a good product, on pushing that product forward in the new green economy that we want to have, and focusing on that rather than being distracted and demoralized by the unresolved issues, by the conflict in the workplace, by the disrespect that is shown for our labor. So this is a righteous fight. This is the fight that should be happening in every single workplace across America. UE is on the leading edge of showing people around this country what the value of our labor is in this fight. That's what this is about. This is about showing workers that we actually have the power when we stand together to take on what we would think is ultimate power. But let's get one thing straight before I finish. These corporate executives want us to think that they have all the power. They have money and they have control. We have the power. They generate no power at all with their work. We generate all the power that is in this economy, every single bit of it. And when we use our power together, we take back the control and we create a balance of labor and economy that works for everyone and works for the people. So with you all the way, this is it. This is the fight. This is about whether or not we are going to write the rules of our economy, or we're going to let the fat cats run away with all of it and have more yachts and more rockets into space as they leave us burning on the earth. That's what this is about. It's that important. And it may be about this fight right here and this contract right here, but it's setting a standard that we all need to aspire to, because this is the only way that we're going to make this world work for us as people.
Thank you so much, Sarah. You certainly encapsulated this fight. It really is about whether workers are going to have some measure of control on their day-to-day lives in the workplace, which then means what kind of life you're going to be able to have at home and for your family. It all comes together, and it starts with the fundamental power that workers have to withhold their labor in order to get the attention of the employer to get their grievances adjusted. So that's what's in front of us here. We're going to put a link in the chat for the report so that you can access it yourself and see all the details. It's a nice piece of academic work that was done there by the Project for Middle Class Renewal. They have lots of nice reports out there. You can check other ones on their website if you want. We're happy that they took this on. And what we'll do now is if people want to ask any questions, make comments, etc., we'd like to try and use the Q&A for that. If people can either put their questions in there or indicate that they want to speak there, we'll call on you so you can say it out loud. You'll need to unmute yourself when you're called upon. So if folks want to put that into the Q&A, we will attempt to call on folks. I'm waiting for the first name to be passed on to me. Ronnie Cook. Ronnie Cook, if you want to, I'm sorry, Ronnie Cook-Zoller, if you want to, Zolke, excuse me, I'm reading this as it comes up, who asked what else can they do to support the workers from UE Local 506? If somebody from the local would like to address what people can do, do you want to take a shot at that, Scott, or do you want me to ad lib? Go ahead.
I think I just got zaw-checked.
Yes.
What I'd say is this is not a fight just about us, right? This is a fight, as Sara laid out, that needs to be taken on in the workforces around the United States, around the world for that matter. It's about basic human decency. It's about respect. It's about accountability. As far as what can you do to support us? The sky's the limit. I know that several have been sending letters to Wabtec demanding that they not just negotiate with our union fairly, but restore the right to strike. But the flip side of that is it's a position that Wabtec is going to hold firm on, at least for now. And at some point, there's a good chance we may be on strike for the right to strike. So that's a decision that our members have made very clear that they're willing to stand a line for. And what I would tell you is if and when that time comes, we'll take all the support we can get. And we appreciate everybody that's participating in this today.
And what I can say is for those who want to kind of keep track on things and know when something happens, sign up for on the UE website for UE action alerts, or sign up for the Green Locomotive Project to be kept updated, because that ties into Local 506, so you'll find out things there. So you'll get on an email list one way or the other. I would like to call on next Chantel Eid. I hope I'm pronouncing the last name correctly. My French is not great. From our allies at the CSN in Quebec. Chantel.
Hi, thank you very much, Carl. Hello, brothers and sisters. I'm very thrilled to be here with you today, although I would hope it would be in better circumstances from our friends in Erie. So my name is Chantal Eid. You pronounced it perfectly, Carl. I'm Vice President of Conseil Central du Montréal Métropolitain. We have 100,000 members in Quebec. The UE and Conseil Central have been friends and allies for I don't know how many years, but obviously this friendship is gonna last. And I want to I'm not the right words, I'm sorry. I want to use what Sara said and say we have the same vision. The working class has more power than the bosses. We have two things that they don't have. We have the numbers, and we have our solidarity. They don't have solidarity, they're only in it for the money. So our solidarity has to go beyond borders, has to go beyond anything else that they're trying to use to divide us. I did a quick search. There is a Wabtec facility close by. So, you know, if there's anything that you think we could do from here, not just sending letters, which if you think sending letters will help, we will do. But let's put our head together and see what we can do to get you what you deserve and what is rightfully yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chantel, and we really appreciate the solidarity, and we will certainly be calling on you as things move forward here. We have a question from Hamilton Nolan asking that we clarify the timeline of actually striking at the shop and what was the percentage on the strike authorization vote. The cart may be before the horse on that. I'll let Scott address that.
I've been checked again. So our strike authorization vote is actually June 3rd. We'll be taking the vote then. Based on feedback I'm getting, I think that it's going to be very much like it was last time around, which was overwhelmingly positive. I think it was a little over 99% last time said yes. So I don't really anticipate it being much different this time. But as far as the timeline goes, our contract expires midnight, June 9th. And on Friday, we will be sending the company a letter that we are in no way looking to extend our current contract, that midnight on June 9th will be the deadline.
Okay, and I think that answers another question we had from John Woodruff, if there was any chance of a ULP strike or other action. I will say the company has committed a good number of ULPs at this point. I think we've got 10 charges filed at this point. So exactly how it all looks, we'll see at that point. Go ahead, Scott.
I was just going to say, I think by now it's at least 10 ULP charges.
Yeah, there may have been an additional one today at the bargaining table. So I will call on next Peter Gilmore, who has his hand on and up and knows something about the history of this plant.
Well, as a matter of fact, about 40 years ago, I wrote a pamphlet entitled UE Led the Way about the struggles in the 30s and the 40s. Very clearly, UE still leads the way. I think it's a real credit to the organization that of all the unions in the United States, it's UE that's convened this important discussion on this topic at this time. So more power to you, sisters and brothers.
Thank you very much. So believe it or not, I don't see any other questions or hands up right now. So the floor is open. There's a lot of folks out there who have been involved in struggles, and we'd be happy to take additional questions or thoughts here that you'd like our panelists to respond to. We have somebody asking on the Facebook page if they can vote if they're out on sick leave. That's definitely a question for either Scott or Leo. It's one of our members.
I would refer them to call the union hall and speak with the business agent.
Okay, speak with business agent John Miles at the local 506 hall. John Woodruff has his hand raised. Go ahead, John.
Hi, Carl. Good to see everybody out there. I hope you're all doing well. It's been a while. One of my thoughts that popped into my head when I was listening to you guys talk was what President Biden did with the railroad workers strike, and went in and basically they were ready to go out on a wildcat strike, and his administration, I think, put the kibosh on it. So I'm wondering if that's on the radar screen at all.
So, Sarah, do you want to touch that one with a 10-foot pole, or do you want me to go ahead?
Why don't you start, Carl? I may want to pile on.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, there's no secret that UE's always had the outlook that we've got two corporate parties here. One we get a little bit more shelter in than the others, but there were certainly folks in the Democratic Party happy to see that strike not take place. We were quite angry that the right to strike of those workers was taken away. We have to admit though, too, it was, that there were failures of labor leadership there too, amongst those unions. And some of them, they had members who were ready to strike and leaders who weren't ready to lead those strikes, and were probably just as happy to see a resolution forced on them at a time when they had a lot of leverage. And it's too bad that happened. It could have been very inspirational for the labor movement. This year, we're hoping to see some things different. I mean, we're looking at this fight that we're waging right now in Erie. Coming up behind us will be the UPS contract battle, which could well end up with that's the largest single contract in the country. I believe it's over 100,000 workers in the Teamsters. And then the Detroit 3, the big auto companies, US-based auto companies, well, they aren't even all US-based anymore, their contracts with the UAW, with the new leadership there, also in that union, are up this fall. And the Canadian piece of that, which Unifor represents, is up at the same time. And it's first time in many years that both of those contracts, many decades, that both of those contracts are up together. So we could see a lot of industrial action this summer and fall, especially with the pressures that everybody's facing from inflation, et cetera, needing to make that up. So I'll stop there. Sarah, did you want to add anything to that?
I think that where you started is what we need to be thinking about. So we were not well set up as labor to take on that rail strike together. And I think that we have to recognize that the attack on the right to strike in the United States was really set off in serious motion when Ronald Reagan fired the air traffic controllers in 1981 and essentially said to all of corporate America, it's open season on workers and on strikes, made strike a dirty word. Thank God for the Chicago teachers who resurrected the word strike in a very public battle for the common good in Chicago, and within only 10 years took over the mayor's office with the power of that strike. But we have to recognize these very key moments. This fight right here at Wabtec is a key moment. This is how you're showing what the power of the strike can do. It leads to resolution. It doesn't lead to chaos. We know how to get results. That's to make it very clear about what our power is as workers and that we're willing to use it. And so we need to be looking for these opportunities. We should have been looking as an entire labor movement at that freight rail strike, getting around the workers on the freight rail. I want to recognize that those freight rail negotiations have been happening under the Railway Labor Act with an arbitrator for decades. The workers have not really had a say. The workers have not really been engaged in their negotiations. And the reason that you heard about it is because the workers are rising up. They're rising up and saying that they want a different outcome, that they need a different outcome, that they want different leadership, that they want to go in a different way, that they want to exercise their power. And I just want to note that it wouldn't have been a wildcat strike. It actually would have been a legal strike that Congress passed that legislation 9 days before the strike deadline, didn't even give it a chance for the company to have to feel the heat of that strike deadline. But I think that is not just on the politicians, that is also on the labor movement. And we have to do better. We have to be more strategic. We have to be doing what we're talking about on this call. And there are huge opportunities that Carl just laid out. The first one coming up, that UPS strike, August 1st. Teamsters are doing it right. They're setting this up right. And we have to understand this is our fight too, because every single one of these are going to define what it means for the workers to have power or not. And so we have to see every single one of these fights as our fights too.
That's great. Absolutely. Okay. I've got a couple of the panelists with their hands up, so I'm going to let them speak to this also. I'll start with Scott Slawson and then go to Reverend Freeman. Or were you looking to speak to something else, Scott? Okay. Reverend Freeman, did you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I think one of the fundamental things here, I'm a student of organizing on a broader context. I'm not very familiar with 506, particularly in Erie, but I think it's a wonderful opportunity here for us to grow labor. And one of the things that I think corporations have done is siloed us. They've made us think only about our contract. And here's an opportunity. If we build tentacles, stronger tentacles, connections to the community, we are going to be stronger in the long run. If I can only get me thinking about my contract without any understanding of how that impacts the community that surrounds me, they got me beat. And when we start talking about what they have done effectively, they've effectively infiltrated many of the centers of power in our communities, not the least of which are our centers of worship. And they've got a us versus them mentality. And when many of our workers get to work, they bring that mentality with them. We've got to build that union, united front, that what happens at the union shop also affects our community. Whereas right now the dialogue is what happens at the union shop is totally antithetical to what is important in the community. I think this is a wonderful opportunity to build relationship, not just transactional, but relational situations with clerics, with others in the community, to talk about how does this impact us? Because every dollar your workers earn, guess what? It impacts the community. No small measure. And so as a trained economist, we call it the multiplicative effect of the economy. If you are making $70,000, that money turns over in that community. Let's talk about how that has an impact on the community, not just the worker, but the whole community. So bring in the pastors, bring in the leaders in the community. Let's build a stronger coalition so that they can't divide and conquer us anymore.
Okay, thank you. I am going to call on Scott now because there's a question here that came in requesting an update on negotiations. So I'll certainly defer to you on what can be said publicly about that at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think Robin Alexander asked the question. I think it's a good question because it does play into what we're discussing right now. One of the things that we've noticed throughout this negotiations is in every proposal we've made that's put any kind of accountability on the company, whether it's the right to strike, whether it's changes in the grievance process, whether it's equal distribution of overtime, they've wholesale rejected, which clearly indicates that they don't want to be held accountable for any of their actions. Which is commonplace, right? They only want to be accountable to their board of directors and their shareholders. And, that's where, to the point Sara was making earlier, the fat cats get fatter and the working people, they suffer from that. I want to, address what the good Reverend said here, because for us, it is always about community. That's one thing that we've been very clear about right from the beginning. This is not about just the workers at Wabtec. This is about the community we live in, which for us is several communities. When we have 1,400 workers, we have workers from New York to Ohio to Pennsylvania. So that's extremely important to us. So when you look at the economic side of things, after what we've seen happen with inflation over the last several years, not only have they proposed an insult for an economic proposal, which is three $1,500 lump sums and a 2% pay raise, but they've done us the favor to offer to increase our insurance prices drastically on top of it. So by the end of 4 years, our members are actually losing money instead of gaining money, which takes money out of the community that we live in and takes potential away from the primary jobs, the secondary jobs, and the tertiary effect to that as well. So these are things that when we consider talking with our membership and approving a contract or not, recommending approval or not approval, that we have to be open about, because as our buying power decreases, our community suffers from that. And the Erie community has suffered quite a bit over the last several years with regards to that. So, I hope that that's the update that you were looking for. And, we're where we're at right now.
Thank you, Scott. We have a question here, a very good question about other collective bargaining agreements in the U.S. that it says that do not include no strike clauses. I assume what you mean that do have the right to strike over grievances. And funny that you asked, there are actually a surprising number of contracts, particularly national contracts and ones that date back to the CIO organizing era of the 1930s and 40s, where there is still language in the contracts, giving the union the right to strike over grievances in some circumstances, usually after, exhaust certain processes, et cetera. To our knowledge, other unions are not exercising it or even threatening it. And they could have a lot more power over their day-to-day lives if they did. That means, leaders being willing to lead their members in those sort of fights. And as Scott mentioned, you're not actually going to go on strike very often over it, because you really have to get, as Sara indicated, you got to get buy-in from everybody to actually do it. So it's got to be an issue that's important enough and moves people. But if you do, you could make that happen. And if you do it once in a while, you hold the company management a little bit more honest than they would otherwise be. So we hope certainly that others will take inspiration from this and go back and look at their own contracts. And if they have that right, maybe make use of it. And if they don't have it in their contract, think about trying to get it in the contract for the future. We have a hand raised by Kasia Mazdel. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Yes, thank you so much. And thanks so much for this conversation. I'm a member of the New Jersey Teachers Union, the NJEA. And I will make sure and pass all of this information along to my comrades and colleagues. I wanted to ask a question. So, I live in a state where employers can, file an injunction against public sector workers for striking. And we've just witnessed one of the largest public sector strikes in the history of our state at Rutgers, which some of us are hoping is really going to serve as a model and a catalyst for action, particularly among teachers. And, it's a very common refrain among teachers: we're not allowed to strike. It would be nice if we could strike, but we're not allowed to. And I just wondered, and I think most of us know that if you have a supermajority, you can strike, and so I just, given hearing about your strike authorization vote in your particular context, I wonder if you have any thoughts about how to shift the narrative from like allowed, not allowed to, do we have the power or do we not have the power? I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes tremendous sense. And I know the right panelist to give you the answer to that, and that's Sara Nelson. Go for it. I can see that was like a softball thrown to you.
Absolutely. I mean, so let's look at the West Virginia teachers strike. They don't even have the right under their state constitution to collectively bargain. But when it came down to it, all 55 counties not only struck, but there wasn't a single administrator in any one of those counties who was willing to file an injunction against them, because the communities had been stripped so negatively by the state budgeting, and the public education and the public resources and the public had become so minimal that everyone was with the teachers. And when the teachers were not sure about whether or not they could go out and do it, the bus drivers said to them, not a single kid will get picked up by the buses. So there was a spirit of solidarity there that came together in West Virginia and overcame the laws that were in place. Because the reality is that there are no illegal strikes, there are only unsuccessful ones. So when the issue is righteous, when we have open bargaining, when we are engaging the members, engaging the community, like we've been talking about on this call, like they did at Rutgers, frankly, a very good job about helping everyone understand why that strike mattered to them, then a strike can be successful every single time. It takes hard work, but it's righteous work and it's justice. And when people understand justice, when you give them an opportunity to talk about that and you give them the opportunity to see that they have power together, and if you build that, you can create a strike that, whether it says it's legal on the books or not, can be successful and win.
And people should take a look at the example. Here's an example in Canada of the mostly educators, I believe, who were preparing to go on strike in Ontario, and the provincial government passed a new law making it illegal. And they said, oh yeah, and they went out on strike. And then most of the, when the government threatened them, most of the rest of the public sector and private sector unions in the province said, we're all going to go out on strike. And now you're going to have a general strike. And all of a sudden the government backed off. They repealed the law. They settled the contract with the workers, et cetera. I mean, that's back to, there's no illegal strike. There's only an unsuccessful one. So you've got to organize the people to be with you. And in fact, originally, most public sector workers had no right to collective bargaining at all. And it was won by illegal strikes, or what was called illegal strikes at the time. So good. Trying to get through a few of these other questions. There was one that came in on Facebook that Scott probably comes to you. Will the union recommend a contract without a strike clause?
I mean, yeah, that's a very broad question, right? Because it all depends on where you're at with a collective bargaining agreement and at what point you put it in front of your members. So, you know, it would depend on the overall agreement and what it looks like, you know, but we would make it very clear that, again, you were voting on 4 years of the same with regards to the grievance process. But that being said, you know, I think that the focus should be more on rather, would we recommend that or not? It should be more on making it clear to the employer that as a member, I'm not willing to accept a contract that doesn't have the right to strike in it. You know, for the reasons, again, of accountability, what it comes down to is, you know, we've been sued by our own employer for essentially beating them in the grievance process. And you know, we've had members that have been terminated without just cause, and they're out for very long periods of time before we even get to an arbitration hearing. And then you're putting your hands in the face of somebody that's not even involved with the day-to-day workings of the plant. So it's a complicated question, and it's one that, you know, our executive board would you know, they would be the ones to make that recommendation, whether to accept or reject, based on the overall package, not just based on one or two elements of what's being offered.
Good. Dan DiMaggio asks if we can say more about how the Wabtec contract fight relates to the push for greener locomotives and the effort to make sure that the jobs producing these are good union jobs. Go ahead, Scott.
I guess I'm up again. So, yeah, I mean, the Green Locomotive Project is actually something that we started way back in 2019. One of the things we recognized in the rail industry, you know, again, the rail bosses, was that they were not following the EPA guidelines. And the EPA back in the late 90s came up with a set of emission guidelines that needed to be followed. And this is what I'll say is the company's version of a strike. And they've adopted not to buy the newer, cleaner, better locomotives that are healthier for everybody, especially, you know, when you deal with the fact that many rail yards themselves are in inner cities, and it's generally impoverished people that live around those rail yards, and primarily people of color. And it's study after study has indicated beyond a shadow of a doubt that those older locomotives spew a lot of diesel. They increase cancer rates and asthma rates and other risks to health. And the railroads have made no attempt to start adopting the newer technology. You know, today the standard is the Tier 4 locomotive, which actually started rolling out on the tracks in 2015. Our plant was actually the first plant to roll out the Tier 4 locomotive. The EPA projected at that time, by this date that we're at today, approximately 35% of all U.S. freight locomotives would be Tier 4. And as of yet, that number is less than 10%. So instead of actually replacing locomotives with the newer technologies, what they've done is they've choose to just continue to rebuild old locomotives and keep them out there running the tracks, which is no benefit to the environment or anybody in the communities that live around those. So we started that initiative in 2019. And one of the things that we've asked for in bargaining here is to partner with the company to build the green locomotives, to make a push from both a legislative standpoint and a push for the workers here in this factory to be building those locomotives. Just a few short years ago, this locomotive plant was cranking out 1,000 locomotives a year, which is a staggering feat when you consider the size of a locomotive and the technology behind them. But the company has, since built another locomotive plant. So it would not be a stretch for us to, as the Reverend said, bring these jobs to Erie, to build these locomotives in Erie. Our infrastructure is still in place to do that. And we have a workforce here that's ready to do that.
Thank you, Scott. The next question we have, it's the last one here right now. We're just about at the end of the hour. Asks if we could speak to the right to respect picket lines of other unions. This is also possible in contracts, but rarely actually there and still more rarely exercised. How do we move more unions to fight for this right? Sara, is that something you'd like to take on?
Sure, Carl. So I'll just note right away that secondary boycotts are legal under the Railway Labor Act. And we should have used that right, like I was referencing earlier with the PATCO strikers in 1981, not understanding that PATCO was a strong union that was ready to strike and had struck before and was quite powerful, but they didn't ask other unions to join them, and other unions didn't recognize that that was a moment for their fight too. We have some contracts in our union that deny the right to strike between contracts. Those contracts were settled a long time ago, typically in very tough bargaining with some of the worst employers. And these were some provisions that went into the contract in order to get those contracts settled. That is something that should be off the table for all of labor. The corporate elite needs to understand that we're not going to agree to that ever again, and we're going to work to get all of those provisions out of our contract, because the last thing that we can do is cross someone else's picket line when we're just stabbing ourselves in the heart by doing it. So that's the way that we see it. We're working to get those last vestiges of old contract language during a time when that was very popular for the corporate elite to demand in order to get these contracts done, and when workers were willing to settle for that because they didn't necessarily understand the reality of what they were agreeing to. There's a much greater consciousness right now that we have to fight. We have to fight together. These rights are not something that are from one contract to the next, but something that is a human right that we have to fight for in that way. So this is the time to beat that back. And I'll just say it again, for anybody who heard that, secondary boycotts are legal under the Railway Labor Act. So airline and rail unions, if there is a picket line set up, that could be a legal strike where others don't cross that picket line at that airport or on that rail line. So there's a lot of strategic work for this labor movement to do, and we can do it when we work together.
And I'll give another hint, which is even when you have a no strike clause, you do have protections that if you think your safety is going to be threatened by crossing a picket line, that maybe you're not going into work for those reasons. There's creative ways to do it. This is all about rebuilding the solidarity that built the labor movement, that built the modern industrial labor movement in the 1930s. And the reason the labor movement had so much power then in the 30s and 40s was because it fought for and used tools that were illegal at that time. They made them legal in some cases for some period of time. They were made illegal again, but that doesn't mean people shouldn't have been continuing to exercise them. It's the way we have power. So I think we're right at the top of the hour here. I think this was a really good discussion. Thank you to all of the panelists. Thank you to all of the participants and all of the good questions that were raised here. Please consider signing up if you aren't already for the UE Union Activists, and you'll be able at ueunion.org. You'll be able to continue to get updates, and we will see you in the struggle. And keep your eyes on the news. And if you're anywhere where you can get to Erie, Pennsylvania, starting on June 10th, there may be a picket line that you can come show some direct solidarity at. And if not that, then be looking at the end of July for the Teamsters at UPS, and in the fall for the UAW, and any struggle you see between now and then. Solidarity is what we need. I think Reverend Freeman really expressed it well in terms of how the struggle for workers is the struggle for community, and vice versa. And that's how we have to all see it. So thank you again, Reverend Freeman, Sarah Nelson, Scott and Leo from UE 506. And thank you everybody for participating with us, and we'll see you down the road. Solidarity.
Solidarity forever.
Go UE.